You determine how much masturbating you do.
You're ready to be premature all over again.
Wow, that's impressive.
Quick
bro.
reset. Quick reset.
Yeah, that's right. Licking gin balls.
It's just going to be a vicious cycle.
Who knew the job was pro bono?
I was so high that I shit myself at some point.
Okay, get still here. Somebody, everybody mute. Goddamn, you're killing me.
The joke's on you. It's actually addicting.
There's nothing wrong with punching above your weight.
To play with you.
Well,
I don't know what's
also-
worse. You're a ginger or you've been vaccinated.
You sit around and drink and solve the world's problems, right?
Hey, let's go ahead and unwrap this present
So,
let the debate begin.
Welcome back to another episode of A Spirited Debate. We are here for another one. This is the 5th episode of season 2, and this one is probably going to be a good one. So everybody get ready. But before we begin, as always, how's everybody doing? Haas is over here stretching. I don't know what the fuck. Oh shit, my dogs.
Not good.
Dogs just want to shit on me. All
I'll be
right.
back.
Yes. Grinch, you didn't want to blow your load?
Already
No?
did.
Oh,
Already did.
okay. All right.
Yeah, you didn't hear it?
No, I missed it. It's quiet these days.
It's quite
I don't know how you missed that.
That's old age.
quite the load blowing.
Huh?
All right.
Fucking hair though, bro.
So,
Rich is sitting outside going, what are you doing in there?
Yeah,
and it looks like you have like a racing stripe, like gray.
I do.
Right?
I do. It's right
Uh-huh.
there. It's right there.
Okay. Just rub a
Some
carrot on
sleek
it. It'll
performance going on.
Yeah, we are back for episode 5. Interested to see how this one plays out. We actually have a guest on the show. So a few weeks ago, we had a guest in Jason Hawk where we talked about Afghanistan. So this week we have a new guest. This guest actually,
Hawk.
what did I say?
Hawk. It happens to him all the time. You're not the
I
first.
will edit that, Jason. I'll edit that. Don't worry. This is actually the guest that we have on is, interestingly enough, somebody that I've actually known longer than the three of you, as scary as that is. And so I am pleased to present him. My brother is joining us today. Glad he's here. Loki decided to drop in. I don't know what you want to do. Do you care if we go by your name?
Oh, I'm not worried about it. One way or
Okay,
the
so we invited Fuckface in, and I've known him my entire life.
yeah, it's one of those. As long as I know you're talking about me or to me, it doesn't matter.
I was thinking about this earlier today. Shouldn't his nickname technically be G.I. Joe?
I mean,
He was in the Marines.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, but the sentiment is the same.
Sure. Tell that to a Marine.
Joe's looking for, where's the hang up?
Oddly enough, it was the guy who was in the army who spoke up, protesting,
Defending
not the
them.
guy who was in the Marine Corps.
That's right.
I worked with a lot of Marines. I know they're proud of
He
being in
knows the
Marine Corps.
distinction, right? So
I know.
yes.
Y'all know it.
Yeah, that's all that matters. Who gives a shit, right? So my brother is joining us today. He actually mentioned the topic of today's conversation a while ago, and we've been trying to work it in. And obviously, once you know the topic, you'll know that it's been peppered through a number of our shows, and we thought it would be a good time to bring him on and discuss this particular topic since he brought it to the table. So, Joe, thanks for joining us. It's great to see you. It's been a while.
Welcome. It's been
Yeah,
too long.
Thank y'all.
Yes. But first, we're going to jump
way too long.
Yeah, for you guys, it's been over 20 years. So I've seen him a little more recently. But-
Aging like a fine wine.
Yeah, that's vinegar at this point.
You look like Mom.
Joe the Silver Fox.
Yeah, we're going
All right, let's go ahead and move this train along. So we're going to jump into drinks. Joe, since you joined us and you're the guest, I'm going to let you go first. What drink did you bring today?
All right, I brought what I call an Uncle Clive. It's actually, I made a mistake when I was telling you about this before. It wasn't a Rhett Butler, it was a Scarlett O'Hara, and I'm not fucking calling it that.
No?
So Uncle Clive in honor of Uncle Clive, who used to drink Southern Comfort and cranberry juice, or Southern Comfort at least, all the time. And I don't know what his relation was, whether he was granddad's uncle or grandma's uncle or something like that.
He would be our dad's uncle.
Okay. So,
Is that right? Our dad's uncle. Yes.
yeah, granddad's uncle.
Yes. Yeah. There you go.
So, and I was introduced to the drink.
As a wee lad.
Yeah. A little person, like in the under 14 teams, soccer practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we used to go there.
Go
after practice.
Stay there behind the school, Stonewall Jackson Junior High School. There in
A
Orlando.
Patriot. I believe Stonewall Jackson would be considered a Patriot. Wouldn't you say? No, sorry.
It
Continue.
depends on who you talk to.
That is true.
Yeah.
Go over there, and he and Aunt Edna, his wife, used to give cranberry juice. So I'd sit there waiting for Mom to show up and get a glass of cranberry juice. And I sat down, and he's watching TV, and he's an old guy at this point. He had to be in his 80s.
In his 50s.
Yeah. And he always had a bottle of Southern Comfort, and he said, he just kind of calls me, and he hand me your drink, cranberry juice. And then he just takes this bottle of Southern Comfort and pours a little bit into the glass, and then holds his finger up to his mouth to say, shh, don't tell anybody. Don't let your Aunt Edna know. And I proceeded to drink it. After that, it was, that became the drink.
See, that's why you were always the good kid, because you were drunk and just calm. That's what it was. Mom, Dad, that's what it was. He was drunk as a baby. So you're having the Uncle Clive. I remember, obviously, when you were in the military or right after the military, you would drink Southern Comfort and cranberry juice. Like you go to the bar and have that. Yeah.
Yeah. I would spend, I think the drinks were like $3.50, I think, at the place where we used to drink, and I would go through $60-$80 a night.
You're ridiculous.
Mom and Dad are so proud right
that's
now.
That's on a Haas level right there.
That's early 20s. So
Haas is like, I'm doing that in my mid-40s.
That's impressive, no doubt. Yeah.
All right. So you're bringing the Uncle Clive to the table. Very nice. Southern Comfort and cranberry juice, an ode to our family. I appreciate that. Grinch, the other military individual, what are you drinking?
All right, boys. I did it. The Trinidad Sour.
All right.
I haven't tried it yet.
Okay. What kind of bitters this goes in there?
It's an ounce of Angostura bitters.
No, it's not.
It's a half ounce. Some of the recipes vary, but it's got lemon juice, and then it's got a fucking thing I keep forgetting. I got to look it up. Damn it! I keep mixing up the letters of it. It is orgeat. That's what it is. Which you can make on your own, but I couldn't find orgeat here anywhere. So I'm using amaretto because it's got that almond kind of flavor component to it.
Okay. What is orgeat? I don't even know.
It's an almondy type syrup.
Okay.
Some of the homemade recipes are like take blanched almonds, sugar, water, and then like some fucking weirdo like flour water or, something like that.
So it's sweet.
Yeah, it's more the almond flavor that it's distilling versus a sweetness, because you're putting that lemon juice in there, and then 3/4 of an ounce of like a bottled in bond rye bourbon. So it's got a flavor that's going to hold out. Some call for just a lemon twist at the end. Others I saw. This is my improvised attempt to get mint. Because the idea is
that a fucking paperclip?
It is a paperclip.
Did you just fucking paperclip, man?
Sure as shit did. Yes.
Yes. No expense, man. No expense.
Well, the guy he had drink things, and like little paper clips or clothesline. He had like these little cool bar clothespins. Yeah, and I didn't have that, so I woke up the mint, and let's see here.
Paperclip.
Ooh, that is an interesting drink.
So the base you said is the
Angostura bitters.
Okay.
Yeah,
and the metallic flavor bleeding off the paperclip.
Yes.
And the Angostura bitters is 44% alcohol.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so
because you never use much.
That's right. Because any other drink, you go more than a couple of dashes, and it just destroys the drink. In the sense it's so overpowering, which is why when Giuseppe Gonzalez in New York, the bartender that designed this drink, everybody was just like, how is that going to work? Like, if bitters normally overpowers everything, there's no way. It works. It works. Okay.
Yeah,
Trinidad Sour.
Just him saying that made me think of the end of that video that you shot. The reaction to the
with him. This is fucking horrible. Who made this shit?
Wait, I did. Damn it.
Yeah, that's you. Exactly. The Trinidad Sour. All right. So you pulled it out of the bag. Is this something you find you would drink on a regular basis, or you've tried it?
It's funny. I was talking to a guy in town who's got probably one of the best places in town to get a mixed drink. They do a lot of craft cocktails, and I was talking to him about this one, and he's like, if you look at the price point to sell it, given the fact that it's an ounce of bitters, you'd have to charge like $24 for the drink.
So it doesn't get sold.
Yeah. He's like, it'd be one of those, if one-off somebody asked for it, you got to figure out a price, to make it. But I mean, it's one of those, you're going to make one, you're going to put the time into it and then just sip on it. Because, I mean, like we talked about, when you got alcohol with alcohol and lemon juice.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, how was that exercise of getting that ounce of bitters out? Was that good times?
No,
for you?
Here's the funny thing.
Fond memories, or
they literally tell you pop that little top off.
Yeah,
it's like.
Smart.
Yeah, because it's so much, you're going to be, like you said, you'd be like, blah, 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 blah.
See, I imagine Haas does it right into his mouth and then spits it in the glass.
It's not a bukkake.
But it could be.
You take why bottles.
He comes on the show, his face is
Why
covered.
are you selling the process short, bro?
I feel like this may not be Grinch's first Trinidad Sour today.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thank you for the Trinidad Sour. 2 down, 3 to go. Haas,
I'm gonna go into some bars around here and ask for that and see if they actually make it and see what they charge.
Okay.
Yeah, do it.
I mean, it's better than going into bars, kneeling and asking them to fucking Angostura bitters on your face.
You don't go to bars. They have special clubs for that.
Okay.
Have you, by the way, have you made it to Lou's American Bar yet? That's a great bar there in Austria.
I don't even know. Okay.
In Vienna.
Yeah,
but while you're Googling that, tell us what you brought to the table to drink. Is it another gin drink?
It is another gin drink, and this one I actually don't like.
Oh, look at that.
It's called a Dom cocktail.
Okay.
DOM. It's gin, Benedictine, Dom, and orange juice.
So not a fan. Eh? Not a fan.
Yeah. I only took one sip, but
too much Dom for you.
It's just way too bitter.
Okay.
Yeah, probably way too much Dom. Yeah, I'm just this will not go into rotation.
And what's this called?
A Dom cocktail.
Dom cocktail. Okay.
And that is courtesy of your Cocktail Flow app.
Flow app. Okay. Yep. Well, that was a loser. The last few gin drinks have been winners. This was not. They can't all be winners.
That's true. They can't. Yep.
All right, Mac. What did you bring to the table?
I tried to go with a theme drink today for our topic. I made what's called a Stars and Stripes.
I'm about to bust out in the national anthem here, and you're like, gay.
That doesn't make you more of a patriot to bust out. I'm just saying.
Oh yes, it does.
It
the problem is,
it doesn't make you any more
when
lesser.
you see
gay.
what it looks like. I would have expected it to be like red and white.
Shit.
Just throw it on your face and let's see.
All right, given how we've already started,
Angostura bitters, this shit on my face.
We're going downhill quick. All right, so this is called a Stars and Stripes.
It's called a Stars and Stripes. It is vodka, pineapple juice, and vanilla ice cream. You mix it all together, blend it up, and pour it in a little cup. You're supposed to be able to top it with a lime wedge, which, as the chief margarita officer, I'm sad to report that I did not have any limes in the refrigerator. That seems very bad. And no paper clips to put the lime in there with.
I'm so confused by the fact vodka's in it, and it's called a Stars and Stripes.
It really was kind of a weird. I guess maybe the vanilla ice cream.
Do you say vodka, pineapple juice, and vanilla ice cream?
Vanilla ice cream.
I mean,
that sounds like it's good.
You would get it in an ice cream parlor in Italy or something.
Yeah, it does exactly. It doesn't make me think of America though.
No.
I mean, maybe you take in a binder clip and you'd binder clip.
That's right.
Or you top
to it, a lime wedge to it.
You top it with a goddamn Budweiser.
I did.
That's right. It's America.
I searched for patriotic drinks, and after 12 pages of Budweiser, I came across this.
Yeah.
So
I'm going with the Stars and Stripes.
They're like,
again,
do a shot of Jack and drink some Budweiser.
That's just America right there.
That's right.
So no, it's good, but I just don't understand the Stars and Stripes name. I would have expected to see some maybe some red coloring in it or something. Maybe I should have added some food coloring.
That might have helped, but that's okay. Stars and Stripes. You gave it a shot, unsuccessful, but is it good?
It's good. Yeah.
What vodka did you use?
I used the Highland West
vodka.
Gotcha.
And then I will finish this out.
Thanks for asking.
No problem. I too tried to go with something not, as themed on what we were doing. And it was not so much the drink itself, but in the way I tried to do it. But unfortunately, I was sitting here waiting and I started drinking it. So, but I did a watermelon mojito where it's basically rum, mint, but you take fresh watermelon, you muddle it, and then you add simple syrup, fresh lime, and then pour in your white rum, put ice in a shaker, you shake it up, you pour it in a glass over ice, and then it gets topped with a lime wedge. Well, I thought I'd be clever and top it with some blue curacao because the watermelon made it red, the blue obviously. So unfortunately, because I've been drinking, it is now a green muddled color. But when I first had it,
and what's the green come from?
It's blue curacao, which is a blue liqueur, and then the red from the watermelon. But it's now mixed because I've been drinking it.
That sounds more Caribbean than anything.
Well, it's called a watermelon mojito. Look, it's not called Stars and fucking Stripes, okay? So at least I got that right.
It's called the hammer and sickle.
All right. So we have our drinks. As always, cheers, gentlemen, to you for a good show.
Cheers,
hopefully.
Gentlemen.
Cheers.
And let's go to work. So for all of you intelligent people out there, if you hadn't figured it out, obviously, the topic is going to be something related to the Stars and Stripes. Patriotism is actually the topic. This is something that got brought to the table from my brother a long time ago. And he asked, this is something we should cover. We never got to it. He resubmitted something saying, hey. And so I thought, you know what? We need to do it. The interesting part, and this was not on purpose, is the first the first 3 episodes, because episode 1 of season 2 was basically kind of a recap. But the last 3 episodes, in some way, shape, or form, have had to do with the idea of patriotism. And I thought, let's have him on. Let's go ahead and just dig our heels in, get the topic done, invite him on the show, and let him talk about his perspective on patriotism, and kind of go from there. And whether or not it's a debate or not will remain to be seen. But that is the topic, is patriotism. Grinch has mentioned patriotism and nationalism. We've touched on patriotism in a number of episodes. So we thought it was absolutely relevant to go ahead and discuss it now. I touched base with Joe during the week, and it was, what is that the ultimate defining question in terms of how we wanted to approach this topic? I struggled with it. I know he struggled with it. And so I came up with a question. So I'm going to pose it to you, gentlemen, because this is something I started thinking about it as I researched the idea of patriotism. And the question I want to discuss is, what is the definition of patriotism today in a global society? Does it exist? Is what it was defined as 200 years ago, 100 years ago, does it mean the same thing? Does it resonate the same way? Because the more I thought about it, the more it was, we are no longer islands unto ourselves in the world today. With internationalism, the fact that you really have to work in conjunction with other countries. We talked about this 2 episodes ago with Jason Houck, that America is in 120 countries worldwide. We consider ourselves a global superpower. So it's really, what is the definition of patriotism, or how do you define it in an international world? So that's the question I pose to you, gentlemen. And we can go down whatever rabbit hole we end up. But Joe, I'm going to let you speak first.
You just said something that I hadn't considered before when you said internationalism. That's not a term that I've ever even heard before.
It's
just one of those things where you got patriotism, which is supposed to be a good thing. You got nationalism, which originally was a good thing, but has gone into a bad thing now. And then you've got, as you said, internationalism. Is that just, we don't care about the country? It's just the events that occur, or how people treat each other around the world?
Yes, it is more of, how do we fit into the global community? Patriotism, the definition of patriotism, let's throw it out there: the quality of being patriotic, devotion to and vigorous support for one's country. And so internationalism has to deal with the global community, and that you are not an island unto yourself, and that you are working in conjunction with other countries for the support of a global society. So it becomes, I think, less about, we have to kind of put aside that patriotic notion of our country always comes first, because we are no longer in a situation where that makes sense.
Yeah, you think more of like the UN when you think of something like internationalism,
Right.
or the World Health Organization, something along those lines.
Right.
But do you have it in front of you as well, the definition of nationalism?
I can bring it up for you real quick.
Okay.
I did. And then, so nationalism is the identification with one's own nation and support for its interest, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations.
Yeah. And that, I mean, in terms of me thinking of patriotism, which, like we've said, it has good connotations in the sense that you want to do what is best for your country, but not necessarily at the expense of others. Like you're proud of your country, the symbols of your nation, that kind of thing. And it reminds me of the kind of the John F. Kennedy speech of "Ask not what you can do for not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." They're like, there's a selflessness of giving to the greater good, as opposed to the nationalism, which is more everything is about our state. As long as we're doing great, don't care what happens on the global stage. We're just beholden to us, and that's all we give a shit about. Whether it is isolationism, whether it is unbalanced trade agreements, blah blah blah. So I don't know if it's a spectrum so much of I think internationalism is in play with both, and it kind of depends on, like, you would envision one with patriotism. I think of like NATO, common interest, common defense, that type of thing, trade deals. Whereas if you slide into nationalism and you think of internationalism, it's, I don't really give a crap. If it's not in our best interest, we don't care.
You mean nationalism or internationalism?
Nationalism as it bridges to
Oh,
internationalism.
gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Joe, you brought the topic to the table. I'd be curious to know what you think in terms of the question I just put forth. What is the definition for you of patriotism, with the understanding that we live in an international society today?
Well, I can't give a definition as like Merriam-Webster or Encyclopedia Britannica does, but my whole thing was doing, being, see, this is where it gets in.
We've put him on the spot.
Yeah. It's one of those where you look at it and you go, what is best for the community at large? You don't do things. It's not the me generation anymore kind of deal. It's not me. You have to look out for the wider community, and whether it is the country itself or your state or your local community, the county, that's where patriotism to me fails for me, because I'm not sure where you're supposed to draw the line. Is it just patriotism is just the country in general? Is it to the government? Is to the ideals that the government was originally set out to be? So I was thinking about this. It's not like losing your religion kind of thing where you're losing patriotism. It's how do you define yourself in that area in which you can say, if I don't do this, I'm not a patriotic person. Or if I do this, I'm a patriot. The problem is with patriotism to me is it's not defined by you at that particular moment. You may think you'd be doing the right thing, and then 20 years down the road, people look back and go, he was an asshole. He wasn't doing anything that helped out, even though at that moment you thought you were doing the absolute right thing.
So patriotism is defined, as Jason Houck said about war. I mean, you can't define if the outcome of a war is positive or negative until years down the road. And patriotism, you're saying, isn't defined in the now. It's defined people looking back on the situation going, yes, they were, or no, they weren't patriots.
Right, because you look at the founding fathers.
Traitors.
At the time, the English thought of them as traitors, rebels. And now, years later, the way we're looking at it is they are the patriots that started the whole thing. And to me, those people are, I define them as America's greatest generation, because they're the ones that fought the greatest power on the planet and did everything they could to achieve independence from them. Yes, the World War II generation, they were highly patriotic. They went and fought, but they didn't do, it was the entire world that was doing that. It wasn't just us. Whereas for the American Revolution, you had all these people who were wealthy landowners who stood a lot, they stood to lose a lot if they lost. Not just their lives, but their livelihoods, their, all the wealth that they had achieved.
Of course, the livelihood of their
it could be
families.
argued. It could be argued they had a lot to gain if they did succeed.
Right, but it wasn't. They weren't.
Not that was the motivating factor.
Yeah, they were trying to separate themselves, and that was, I think, the start of American nationalism, where they were trying to form their own nation away from England, a separation to where their, or our language, our customs, and everything became
our traditions, right?
Right. That was the center, rather than looking at the English, going back to the Magna Carta and all that history and all that they have, and way beyond that. But we were pushing that aside for our own nation, and those people were considered patriots in the end, but not to the English.
So in a modern era, obviously in the global society in which we live in, does patriotism mean the same thing? I mean, it's easy to look at 250 years ago, whatever, when they were carving out this country. It's easy to define, like you said, looking back through history, going, that person's a patriot for what they did. Today, does that having those same values, I mean, does that still mean you're a patriot in today's world?
Well, that's one of those things that you don't know. I mean, you have your own personal opinions.
Yeah, and I want your opinion. That's the point.
No.
So I can't argue with you if you don't give me your opinion, goddammit.
I don't think that you can define for yourself. You can define it for yourself.
Doesn't make you right.
But that's only your own personal opinion within your own head.
Right.
Other people may have a totally different view of anything that you may be doing.
Right, because a lot of people on this show have thought they were right.
Well, okay, so we're saying like some of the individuals who went to the Capitol on the 6th, and January 6th, they probably considered themselves patriots.
I'd be willing to say they absolutely
nobody in this call would consider them patriots.
Right, but then
I don't know. We would consider them patriots outside of that situation, perhaps, but not in that particular situation.
Well, I think to the point that was made, in the moment, you clearly form an opinion, and sometimes history is what later tells you whether you're right or wrong. Now, in this moment, I know, speaking for myself, and I think, speaking for 4 of the 5, just based on our previous podcast, in this very moment, we considered those that participated in January 6th to not be patriotic, despite the fact they used that term repeatedly. And then and kind of drawing from the foundation of our country, we started with the idea of like no taxation without representation. We didn't want to be governed by a nation that was clear across the ocean. We wanted our independence. I mean, that's in our DNA. And I think, it is in our documents, the idea of we cannot allow a tyrannical government. Fast forward to January 6th, that's what a lot of them thought, in the sense of, I know I disagree, but that was what they thought. They were being patriotic because they had assessed their government had become tyrannical and was no longer the country that they thought it was, going back to our foundation. And that justified their actions. Now, the other famous phrase we love, or at least as applicable here is, history is written by the victors, right? So clearly what follows is also shaped by who ultimately ends up on top and how this gets framed. So, I mean, right. From our foundation to January 6th, I mean, I think that's a little bit of the DNA of like that patriotism versus nationalism. And my founding document Constitution told me basically, if I don't agree with what my government's doing because it's lost its way, I'm obligated to act.
Agree.
Let me ask. Looking at a Timothy McVeigh situation there, where he thought things had gone sideways and destroyed the federal building in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, wacky people are wacky people are wacky people.
Well, but I think that idea is applicable absolutely, in the sense that I don't think any of us would advocate for blind patriotism. That's not what we're asking any of our, citizens of this nation to be. But just because you pay taxes doesn't mean your nation is like violating and it's lost its way. And just because your nation carries out a lawful election doesn't mean it's lost its way. But the people that are involved in both of those incidents between Timothy McVeigh and January 6th felt that it had.
But
and that's how they
to an extreme degree.
That's how they justify it.
And that's the thing. It was to an extreme degree.
All right, Mac, what were you going to say, brother?
I don't know.
Lost it.
No. My question is, and I kind of know my answer to this already, but I'm going to ask this question then, based on recent events. Could you say that the Taliban thinks they're being patriotic in taking over Afghanistan?
Yes, because it's a
100%.
devotion to
are they considered patriots?
In their part of the world, I would say yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of nationalism is in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
And in their mind, they didn't want to have an America over there any longer, and they felt like
it's our country. Let's take it back.
mean,
in a lot of ways, it's not. Is it really a lot different than the American Revolution?
And the truth of the matter is, had Osama bin Laden not done the planning of 9/11 there, they would still be there. I think. I mean, why else would we have gone into random fucking country?
The Taliban or
the United States to depose them, of power.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So
we wouldn't have. I don't think we would have gone in there had that not happened, because we haven't gone into Myanmar at all, and they've been,
dealing with genocide
people for years.
Well, because quite frankly, there was no benefit for us to go in there before that.
Yeah.
There's nothing for us to gain.
Venezuela, countries
Joe,
that are in complete upheaval.
Yeah, Joe, I'm going to quote somebody that you are aware of, an English comedian, Eddie Izzard, when he refers to the Germans, and he said, "You were killing Jews in your own country. Nobody cared. But then you killed the Jews in the next country. Stupid man."
Yeah.
Because then the world got involved. So, Joe, you bringing up, Myanmar, as long as they're doing it within their own country, nobody gives a shit. The minute you step outside of a country.
And real quick, I do think the Jews in Germany did care. So somebody did care that they were getting killed.
They did. The rest of the world didn't care. That's the problem. The rest of the world didn't care. But again, I guess that's a valid point in terms of this situation. Patriotism, because we live in a global society, if something does happen halfway across the world, people will go, "Oh, well, I love my country, and whatever, it's the values and the benefits and the interests of my country have to come first." That is not always the case today. It can't be. You have to take care of your neighbor.
Well, and the simple truth is, until it affects you, you don't really care.
Well, and that was my point.
Wasn't it how
right? There was no point. There was no benefit for us to go into Afghanistan until we thought that okay, Osama bin Laden's hiding there. We're going to go thump our chests and go find him and kill him. But before that, they didn't give a shit about what was going on with the Taliban. Quite frankly, I don't think so.
We didn't care about ISIS until they almost overran Iraq.
Right.
I mean, either way, I think in tying it back to the idea of patriotism, like, if we're being honest, like, and I think where you were about to go with that, Thor, was, Jason's comment was, if you're going to be a superpower, act like it, kind of thing.
Yep.
But
not just that, but didn't he use the analogy where it was like, we're all in a subdivision, right? If there's a crack house down the street, eventually that crack house is going to make it all the way down. It's going to take over the whole neighborhood. Like, you have a duty and an obligation.
Yeah. And that idea is based in like a criminology theory, which is the broken windows theory of like, if you allow a neighborhood to have broken windows and you never fix these things, people stop caring because they just see a shitty building that nobody seems to care about. So what's one more rock through a window?
Right. Are we going to start going down stop and frisk now?
It's just one of those, like, I still think, all right, so back to patriotism, it still resides in the idea of you support your nation and what's in the best interest of your nation. We're at a point now where not everybody agrees with some of that. Now, acting on war is one thing, but I think maybe if we kind of focus on being at home, that's clearly where the rift is call it Trumpism, call it whatever you will. There are people in our country who do care deeply about the Constitution and believe that they are being patriotic because they think the nation has lost its way.
Well, yeah, but here's the problem. The problem is what they don't understand, and you kind of brought this up earlier when you mentioned NATO, is there are world trade deals that greatly affect the United States. Like who we trade with and how that money and those operations flow back and forth are a big freaking deal. It's not as simple. It's not as black and white as it was when we succeeded from, England.
Oh, I agree.
Or things like the Paris Climate Accord, being involved in that.
But the core of...
See, and there you're going into internationalism there, yeah?
But the core of the base that voted Republican are a lot of poor white people who feel like the country left them behind. Now, I totally agree. It's a bit of like, so let's walk the dog on this. So like, what is it you really think should happen? And there aren't good answers. They just aren't happy with where things are, right? And it's a bit of the, I'm never to blame for my own predicament, this and that. Never want to pay taxes, but I complain about this road, that isn't fixed. I don't like international trade, yet it brings billions into the nation. It's just, they don't see that. Like, they don't feel the connection between something at that level and the fact that they're in poverty, or just generally displeased with, this woke culture and the left and
Yeah, but the problem is that same base elected a guy who and they felt like they were being left behind. All they did was elected a guy that stood on the gas pedal and put them farther in the dust. I'm sorry, but and again, he touted isolationism, like, let's close our borders, let's isolate ourselves from the rest of the world, let's get out of Paris, let's close down these trade deals, things that were never going to help his base of people that voted for him. And the problem is, they all said, we're patriots.
Here's the problem. NAFTA made it so that there was a certain segment of the United States population that no longer had guaranteed lines of income from multiple generations, right? It removed a certain portion of manufacturing straight out of the U.S. So now that NAFTA has done that, and we have created a situation where we trade all over the world, that train's left the station. There's no way you roll that back. How do you even do what was it, individual? What do they call it? Isolationism?
Isolationism.
Yeah. How do you even do that now? I don't even know how you roll that. How would you even roll that back?
I don't know.
Yeah, and I would just say, I mean, I agree. It's just, we know those philosophical discussions aren't happening, right? We're just, because, I mean, in fairness, probably a lot of people who saw, oh, by the way, these big corporations that aren't paying a whole lot in taxes move their manufacturing because of cheap labor. All they knew is they lost their jobs, and they may or may not have been told, hey, but it's a new economy. There's going to be a jobs program. We're gonna modernize you into this new world, teach you skills. And it probably never happened.
Well, and none of them were going to pay $5,000 for a refrigerator either that was made in the U.S., right?
That's right. That's right.
You want to complain about, outsourcing and moving all of this manufacturing out, but you want the cheapest shit anyway.
Right. You didn't want to pay the high price that it was going to cost.
Hey, and the promise of America is opportunity,
right?
Not a job,
right?
It's the opportunity for a job.
You make of it what you can.
There's an opportunity to work 60 plus
there
hours.
There is nothing in our Constitution that says what will be given to you other than the opportunity and certain freedoms that will be protected.
Right. Okay. So we obviously gotten off track from our topic.
Yeah, I want to pause for just a second. I felt like Joe was wanting to say something, maybe, and if I'm wrong.
Well, it's one of those things when you go into politics and you say, I don't think the politicians are actually doing their jobs at all to begin with, because their job is actually to look out for the community, the entire, wherever it is that they're from, but they're supposed to put all that together. What they need to do is, they're all nowadays, especially the ones that are hitting the mainstream media that you see all the time with the McConnells and the Pelosi's and the Cruzes and whoever, they're all or nothing. They want it their way, the full thing. Like, that's where I think President Obama screwed up with the Affordable Care Act. They were trying to push this huge piece of legislation through that was getting all kinds of pushback. It's, why don't you try and push one small thing through, and then the next Congress you can try to add to it, and the next Congress you can add to it. Start out with the pre-existing condition thing. And then the next time you say, okay, we're going to let you cover the kids up until they're 26 years of age. And then the next year you say this, and the next, but they don't want to do any of these things. They want the huge, the big money, thing, right?
Ticket items, right?
It's a negotiation, right? You
they're
kind
not
of slowly ease into everything.
Give me it all, or or
I'm
you're
not playing
American.
it all. Yeah.
But I got to imagine sitting at that level, if you're the president and you're going, my time is finite. I may not be here 4 years from now. If I don't get this done, it doesn't get done.
Right,
well, and
that's
what you said.
Well,
yeah,
of course,
but that's what you told your base constituents
you were going to do.
That you were going to do.
Right.
So you can't.
I don't think that they should promise anything.
No, I agree with that, right? Because
but
you
they
can't
what I want to
shit.
try to do, because you're just the president. All you can do is say, here's what I want to try.
Right.
And then Congress can either go, fuck you, or, okay, let's give that a go. But you're not going to get the whole thing that you want. So people who are running for office shouldn't say, this is what I'm going to do, because you're not going to do it.
No.
Well, I agree. It's the funny thing is, and Thor said this, that's how they get elected, by making these ridiculous claims. I mean, any rational person like us is going to look at it and go, "You're not going to do that. Like, you just aren't."
Talking out your ass.
Well, it's the same idea of it's happened several elections now where they talk about in primary, you move to the margins. So you can't. So you secure your base, and then as soon as the primary is done and you're in the general, you center up.
Right.
And I agree with the comment. I absolutely would prefer that. The whole idea of Congress was supposed to be it represents the entire nation, and through compromise, you get an imperfect bill, but you get something that kind of keeps us trending in the right way. And I've heard it described that the whole idea of Congress is to prevent bad legislation rather than set the conditions for perfect legislation.
How's that working out for us?
Yeah, right. But I think I agree with the comment that as much as I think that would have been the right answer of incremental improvement, let's keep improving the foxhole kind of thing. You strike while you can, and he had the votes in Congress. He got it through, and yes, he did what the typical politician does: overpromised, underdelivered.
Right.
And that's kind of the way it is right now. And like you said, we all know half the shit isn't going to happen.
But he's a patriot.
But they're trying to get elected.
Right. So real quick, I just want to ask this question. So Joe, you did time in the Marine Corps. Grinch, you built a career in the Army. And I'd be curious, as with the two of you, in terms of going into the military, 6 years, 20 years, you built that particular career out of being a patriot. It's a patriotic duty to go into the military and defend your country and uphold the beliefs and values. Did you do it because you felt like a patriot? I know, Grinch, you've said in the past, I didn't do it so that people go, "Oh, you're a veteran. We're so proud of you. Thanks for your service." But in terms of patriotism, did you feel it was your patriotic duty when you signed those papers and did it?
And part B of that is, do you feel like a patriot after you did it?
Joe, do you want to go first?
Yeah.
I couldn't even begin to even answer the second part of that.
It depends on the day.
At first, it was just, it was one of those things where it was almost I felt like I was expected to
and
do
I
that.
needed to get the fuck out of Atlanta.
Well, and it's probably worth mentioning the legacy of your family, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, we had our great grandfather who fought in the Army in World War I. We had granddad who fought in World War II,
Iwo Jima,
in the Marine Corps,
Korea.
in World War II, Korea and Vietnam. There. Then two uncles who have been in the Marine Corps, and our father tried to
went in and was
go
out.
in and got 4F'd for a back
issue,
and then me, and now my oldest boy has spent 12 plus years in the Marine Corps, and he's a captain in the Marine Corps after going Mustang. He became staff sergeant in the Marine Corps. Then he went to college, and now he's gone through officer candidate school, and he's a captain in the Marine Corps now. So it's just this long line going through, but it was one of those where it felt like I was supposed to do these things. So I mean, and I don't fault anybody for not talking me out of it, and I had a great time while I was in there. The best job I've ever had in my entire life, and I regret constantly that I left it. But I was 25 years old. I was a stupid kid who got angry at some decisions that were made and said, well, I'm getting out, which was just dumb. And I didn't feel patriotic. When we came back from Somalia, we got redeployed back out to Haiti in '94, which was the first time that had ever happened. A duty amphibious rated group coming back, ending their deployment, getting everything off the ships, and then within 2 weeks, we're loading everything back on again and redeploying down to Haiti. We had news crews on board, and I got interviewed on one of these things, and they're asking me about how I felt about it. I'm going, it's my job. This is what I volunteered to do. It's not that I can be pissed off that I have to actually do my job. This is what we want to do. We joined, we became good at this so that if the time came that we actually had to use it, we consider ourselves the best at whatever it was, and we wanted to prove to everyone else that we could do the job. It wasn't a patriotism kind of thing. It was our own personal way of looking at things, or how we felt that we should act, or we behaved with each other, how we worked together. It wasn't saying, this is for the country, I need to do this. That never even entered into it.
Grinch, before you answer, Joe, this is something you and I haven't talked in depth about it, but I would like to ask you a personal question as it relates to patriotism. So for those that don't know, my brother was a crew chief on CH-53 Super Stallions in the Marine Corps, which is the large helicopters. And so I wanted to ask you, in terms of patriotism, when you guys were off the coast of Africa that night and the helicopters were out and one went down, was it Gruber? I think Dwyer was on Staff Sergeant Dwyer.
That was the first deployment, out Canary Islands in November of '92.
When that went down in the middle of the night, and they were all of them died in that crash. Like, did you think in terms of dealing with it and rationalizing the fact that they were out, that they had died in a helicopter crash, like, there was some patriotic sense of, they died for their country?
Nope.
Okay.
Not a bit.
And again, this is not something you
I
and
mean,
I have
and
talked about.
I don't want to marginalize how those guys may have felt, because I don't know.
Right.
And I will never know. And I don't know how their families felt.
But I remember talking to you, and I know
but we did not ever consider that. It was our own personal loss. It was like anybody losing a family member or a friend with a funeral. It wasn't he died doing what he liked, or he died as a patriot. It was, he's now gone. Let's remember these people as who they were and how we knew them.
I know, because when we have touch base, I know that I think there was some frustration because the Navy wouldn't deploy a search and rescue team that night. They made them wait till the next morning. And I think somebody was actually in the water overnight and died from exposure. It's one of those, like, if they go out, they could have rescued him. So, and that's why I was curious in that situation.
Well, it was nighttime in the ocean, in fog at night over the ocean on night vision goggles. You can't see jack.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I've described when we came in and landed that night, because they were supposed to join up with us and we couldn't make contact with them. We got called back into the ship, and on night vision goggles, you could see the ship sailing into the fog, and all you could see was this pale green haze with the ship hanging in the middle of it. So you couldn't even see the water or the sky, nothing, just the ship. So there was no reference other than that. So you couldn't tell what was around you at all.
Right. Okay. Again, like I said, I know when people will die in military action and stuff like that, it's like, oh, they were patriots and they died, defending the country or doing, like that wasn't them out like rescuing people. They were on just night maneuvers and bad shit happened. So I was just curious.
Well, I mean, I guess the question is that how we as a country justify in our own minds, potentially putting them in a position where that could happen?
Well, people don't realize, and Grinch, you could probably speak to this as well. The media doesn't do a very good job of describing anything militarily. when they say these people died in a training mission. Every mission, unless you're at war, is a training mission.
Right.
You know, you're not, and they're just as dangerous as a wartime mission, because your plane could go down, your ship could sink, your boat could go down, something could happen, because you're not dealing with the safest of occupations. So when people die in a training mission, you know, it's expected that something is going to happen, and you try to minimize it as much as possible. But you know, with as dangerous as it is, there is a possibility that somebody's going to die on a training mission. I've lost friends, just like I said, those 5 friends that were killed in that crash. I had a couple other friends that were killed in a midair collision over Camp Lejeune at night during a training exercise where helicopters were lifting out of an LZ while others were moving, you know, Cobra attack helicopters were moving over in simulated covering positions. And Cobra and a 46 collided, killed everybody on board the 46. And I think one or both of the 50 Cobra crewmen escaped from the crash and didn't die, but were, you know, probably badly mangled, and their careers were over.
And did you feel patriotic?
No,
you know,
again, it wasn't a patriotism thing.
Okay, so Grinch,
I mean,
you 20 years, you've been on multiple deployments overseas, in country, you know, defending, I guess, America's belief system,
interests.
You know? Yeah. Did you feel like patriotic?
Well, maybe kind of meander around a little bit, touching on a few points that Joe talked about, which was, you know, it's a volunteer force. Mentioned that before, and Joe used those terms of that. Nobody was drafted, right? Like, you know, of our own free will, we signed up. So there's that aspect of it. My obviously my timeline's a little different in that I came in, you know, I got to Fort Bragg in January of 2001. Knew, you know, at the time it's funny because I was like, oh, there's not a whole lot going on. Training. That's what we do. And then September 11th happened, and it was like, and here's a whole bunch of deployments and a bunch of time went by, you know? And so, I mean, yeah, certainly like following September 11th, you know, it's not that I was completely jaded in the sense that I couldn't have critical thought, but like I at least thought I understood why we were there, what we were there to accomplish, and why it was in our nation's best interest. Because, you know, we'd been attacked. So it was like, fuck them. We're over here to kill every fucker we can get our hands on, you know, in a sense. It's more complicated than that as we began to learn, because, oh, by the way, there's a people here, there's a culture, are we nation building, what are we doing? You know, now going into Iraq pissed me off. Obviously I deployed to Iraq a number of times, so it is what it is, but I didn't understand that. I thought it was a false bill of goods that let us in there, still do. So like when I reflect back on patriotism, you know, maybe it's personal patriotism in the sense that when we made the decision to retire, I felt like I had done my part, was the way I described it. I did my part. You know, we often say we had a fair relationship with the Army. It paid us pretty well. We enjoyed our experience, got to do all kinds of things I never would have done otherwise. So it was an honest relationship. Yeah, along the way, there were some things that, you know, made me mad, but I think that's normal. To me, where I saw, you know, families and friends affected by the notion of patriotism was when they called into question things that had led to like their son or daughter losing their lives. And I'll use the example of, like in Afghanistan, the whole Korangal Valley and Restrepo and some of the medals of honor that came out of that. I mean, anybody looking back on it in hindsight, and it's easy to in hindsight, saw like we put these people in very, very difficult situations and did not set them up for success. And if I were a parent and my child had been killed under those circumstances, I'd be pissed off too. I would. You know, like with Pat Tillman, that was fog of war mistakes. Like there's some people that probably still to this day feel horrible about how he died. But being there unto itself wasn't the problem. You know, you didn't quite question the mission. I think, you know, there's this notion of, again, giving to something greater than yourself. And And in this sense, I did feel that. I mean, there were times where, like, I look on the flag and it makes me proud. Like, I loved having that flag on my shoulder. And, there were a couple of times I get misty eyed in certain circumstances, whether it was, seeing the flag and kind of thinking back on kind of the totality of the experience of a deployment or whatever. And certainly attended a number of ramp side ceremonies, and thinking about those families coming back and coming into Dover, like all that stuff's with you. It's just, you want to believe it's like there were, the decisions made were in good faith and what was in the best interest of our nation. Hyper politicization doesn't help anymore, because that's what we as a nation we need, is two parties having critical thought and having those debates of, is this the right thing for our nation? And then pivoting a little bit, I would say part of, and I don't remember who said the phrase of, democracy dies when you're trying to get more out of it than you put in. And that's a lot of what we're seeing today, is these individuals who put themselves above their nation and all they care about is what they get out of it, not really characterizing the decisions and things they're talking about within the framework of, and therefore our nation will be better because. That's the part that frustrates me now, as I, kind of see where we are. And now, the dust is going to settle in Afghanistan, I guess. We'll see. I don't know. We're still there. The 82nd Airborne is over there now, as well as, Marines. So we're not quite done with this thing in terms of Afghanistan. But yeah, in the broad sense, I'm proud of my service. I love, I love my country. I love the flag. And yes, I did have some very bitter, jaded moments of just like, what the fuck,
How many people on this call own an American flag?
Yeah.
Okay. I do not. Don't own an American flag. I was just curious. So now we've done that dance. I'm going to pivot for a second, because Haas, you don't live in this country. I don't think that necessarily means you're not a patriot, but you live abroad in a foreign country. And I'd like to know your thoughts on patriotism, because you have now seen a different perspective. Again, like, you can look at Joe and you can look at Grinch when they're going overseas. They are still looking, I think, through the lens of America when you're overseas. I just think in a situation like that, you don't have a choice. But you, of your own free will, you moved abroad. You've been there almost 2 years. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on patriotism as somebody that lives in a foreign country. It calls a foreign country home.
I want to kind of add a question on top of that we can, Hosh, you can answer this as well, and we can circle back. Can you feel, or can you be patriotic for two different countries? Right. I mean, with the world the way it is, I mean, you have people migrating from country to country, living in different places. Can you have that same pride for multiple countries?
That's a good question.
That's a great question, actually. Yeah. I mean, obviously.
Did I just catch you off guard?
But born and raised in America, I mean, it's hard not to be a proud American.
No offense, but you were born and raised in South Carolina. Be careful.
Well,
okay?
I wasn't.
Oh wait. My brother was born and
that's-
raised in South Carolina.
I'm sorry, it's
America.
Just born.
It's America.
Hey, I was born in South Carolina.
Hey, but
Oh my God! 3 of the 5.
Get
of
like
us.
your egg. You get your house egged if you put the American flag out or something, or
Who, me?
you're not Haas.
Oh, I didn't hear that part. I'm sorry. I was laughing.
No. In fact, I mean, we live in a building with people who are, long generational Austrians. Everyone knows we're the Americans in the building. Everybody knows who we are. I say we're kind of loud. I'm kind of loud. My wife is also kind of
They're
loud,
the
I
butt
guess,
people.
too. I mean, Friday nights, everyone knows Friday nights, close your windows unless
That's
you want
right.
to hear what's going on.
Hiding
Everyone
mother
just-
again.
That's right.
That's right,
Everyone
hide the
just
mother.
says, that's right. That was such a great. Anyway,
Sorry.
yeah, I mean,
Continue.
it's weird. I don't find it hard to be proud to be an American. I mean, I find it sometimes too embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for America when I'm over here because there's different conversations that happen over here. Like I said, there's a guy in my building who was special forces for the Austrian military and was stationed all over the world, Alaska, I think he did some time in Texas. He and I have a lot of great conversations over rum in our little courtyard, our adjoining courtyard. And it's interesting to get the different perspectives. I mean, we forget sometimes the history that other nations have had to endure. Parts of our society would go into an engagement like World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, but our whole society as a whole, they were experiencing it through a lens or through other people's experiences. These nations went through that. They have a monument not 2 blocks from where I live called 369 Vulcan, and it's 369 weeks that Austria was occupied by Germany and the toll that took on this nation. And so it's hard. They're very proud people here, Austrians, and they close their ranks. They're very close knit. They're very tight. Austrians don't typically let you into their inner circle. So it's hard as an outsider. It's interesting. But patriotism, I think, I personally still feel very patriotic. My wife is Native American. She feels even more patriotic than I do, and rightfully so. But at the same time, to kind of swing and segue into Mac's question, we do find ourselves becoming more curious, sympathetic, and empathetic, and wanting to know more about and understanding more about the history and the culture of where we live. And we think that's important. I mean, if you're going to assimilate somewhere where you live, you should be respectful in that way. And so we do try to ensure that we're taking those things into account. Yeah, there's a shitload of pride in this country on who they are, and a shitload of patriotism in who they are. And it shows in stuff like the World Cup or the Euro Cup when they show up. I mean, they show up to celebrate and support their country here. The same thing in the Olympics. They did the same thing for that when they had people placing in, whether it was horseback riding or whatever. Yeah.
Well, that's another form of patriotism right there with the sporting events, the Olympics, the World Cups. I found myself during the Olympics, I rooted for the American when they were in whatever it was, but I was more interested in seeing who the fastest was or who could throw the long, the furthest discus or hammer, javelin, whatever, who the best diver was. I didn't care what country they came from, but I would still root for the American that was in it.
When was the Olympics? I must have missed that.
Ended like last week.
Yeah, I know you're being a smart ass, but I agree with you, Joe, in the sense that, we've had this discussion about the World Cup, like despite the men's national team not qualifying, finding it really fascinating. But, in the Olympics, we walked away with the most medals. I mean, by all accounts, we should be able to beat our chest. And I kind of found myself like forgetting about it as soon as it was done.
You were more like,
It's
because we're used to it, right?
The other side, you're right.
And as Americans, we're used to it. We're used to being top dog all over the world.
Yeah, that's the problem with the American sensibility now is we always want to root for the underdog, only
we never want to be the underdog.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you
such a dichotomy there?
And when we are, we skew the rules and go out and get professionals to win everything for us. So.
Yeah. Olympics are amateur sports, and yet all of our NBA players are professional players.
And that needs to be a debate. We need to talk about that at some point.
Well,
because it's not all sports within the Olympics, right?
But you do have, you have professional players that go back and play for and that was the problem, right? You had professionals that were playing for other countries. So that's kind of what brought that to light.
I can't remember who said this phrase, but I remember the phrase that every country advocates in its own best interest. We're the only one who gets criticized for it. And it's a true statement.
No, it is.
Right? If we're the biggest economy in the world, if we go into recession, the world's probably going to go into recession. Like there's some, I think America's not great at being humble. It's not a strength. I think, there are ways to flex and show your power without like rubbing people's noses in it.
We just hadn't figured out how to do it yet.
No, look, we're rough and tumble. We're not a very old country. We really aren't.
I mean, I'm living in a building that's older than our country.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. And like we said, barely 50, 60 years ago, racism was rampant in the sense of laws that existed that prohibited a part of our population from sharing a water fountain.
So the worst part is, is racism is still rampant. It's just the laws aren't on the books anymore.
That makes it okay, I guess.
Taking a different form.
Fuck yeah.
Well, I mean, but maybe circling back, I mean, that is a bit of where this patriotism comes from now, which is this is no longer the nation that people felt it used to be. Right or wrong, or whether it made any sense there to be that way. I mean, obviously, I don't think we agree with that, but they don't think they recognize the nation that it exists now. And we've talked about this before. The Republican Party is based on white grievance politics of how the world used to be, white males in charge. And I'm oversimplifying, but there's a lot of truth to that. So there's this insecurity about, well, where does this go? Well, I don't know. In 100 years, we're all going to be like a lightish brown kind of something. I don't know. We'll be mulatto or whatever it is.
Well, they started releasing some of the census information and saying that now white people are no longer the majority, or at least the next generation will no longer be the majority in the country anymore, because you have the black population, the Hispanic population, the Asian population, and then you have the mix. You got the white population, but then there are the people that have a white parent and a Hispanic parent, or a white parent and an Asian parent, or a white parent and a black parent.
Right.
So it's no one's actually, there are very few people, or there are fewer people now identifying strictly as white. So when the census came out after, a year of,
political delays and everything else,
and all, trying to figure out how to get it counted and all, it's now coming out that whites are no longer the absolute majority in the country, because they're no longer sticking to only white people doing this or only white people doing that.
And let's be honest. I mean, I'm an old white guy and I've never been in charge, and I'm okay with it.
See, but that right there, when I read that, and I think I read it on the Pew Research
sounds right
website, that I was thinking, okay, so now the dream of the melting pot of the United States is actually
it's here,
finally arriving.
It's a reality. Yeah.
And I mean, to that point, I mean, I think you could argue now more than ever it's super important to have an understanding of what patriotism means in this modern world, of caring about this nation and preserving it in the sense of continuing to provide opportunity. And I get it. It's 50 states. We cover a lot of geography. The way we were even created has a lot of history to it, of how we acquired land. Immigration has been present throughout the process. The phrase I used before, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Like, this is where it's headed. And you can stand in front of it and go, I just know, okay, well, that isn't going to work. It's just not.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to, I don't give a shit what things were like 50 years ago. This isn't America of 50 years ago. It's completely different. Like Joe, you said, I mean, just the population in and of itself has shifted so much. So you can't just say, well, I want to go back to, 50 years ago when everything was better and America was great. Well, and America's not great now. It's just different. And a lot of people don't like different. That's the problem.
And it's funny you said it, because what makes America so great, from being over here now and seeing it from the outside looking in, is the fact that it's not the same. The fact that it's constantly evolving and being a better version of itself than we ever thought it could be. Well, yes, actually, it comparatively, absolutely 100%. And I'll tell you why. Because like in countries like Austria, it's the same old, same old. There's not a lot of diversity. It is a lot of white people. Yes, sure, they have refugees and to some degree immigrants, whether they're from the Middle East or from Eastern Europe. But they come here, they get their education, and because of the way that the Austrian government is set up, it's not user friendly. So they come here, they get their education, they get their work experience, whatever, and then they bounce and they go somewhere else. They have an issue here where there's no, and I mean zero, innovation. And it's something that's talked about quite a lot, is how is it the US has so much innovation? How is it that China has so much innovation? And yet We don't.
We work 80 hours a week.
Well, sure.
You guys get rid of some of those fucking holidays, you might
Absolutely.
innovate something.
Absolutely. Listen, I agree. So, you're right. There is a work-life balance argument to be made in that discussion, but it's also the fact that you have hungry individuals coming and chasing the U.S. dream, whether they're coming there or they're born there. It's the American way to chase that American dream, and part of that is the constant evolution of being better than we want to be better than our parents' generation and better than our grandparents' generation. You know, we want to look back and say, thank you, mom and dad, thank you, grandma and grandpa, for lifting us up and setting down these pathways for us to be a better version of a society than you guys were.
There are certain things, and I think Jason talked about it last time, or the last episode I heard was, we want to be the superpower, but the people want to be the superpower, but they don't want to do what's required to be the superpower.
Right.
Yeah.
But hey, Haas, question for you. Do the Austrians do anything like we do, like 4th of July or Memorial Day or anything like that?
They have an Independence Day. I'm not all that familiar with it. But here's the problem, to be honest with you, Joe. They have so many fucking holidays here. I can't keep them all straight. Okay. And I'm just being honest, man. I'm serious. Like, they have like 2 a month at least.
Wow.
And and the other thing is, remember, a majority of the time I've been here has been in lockdown. Austria was essentially locked down for 14 months on and off of some degree. So I'm not as culturally familiar with some of that stuff, but yeah, they have a national holiday.
Do they name their kids Adolf?
No, absolutely not.
I was just wondering, since he's from there.
100% not. I mean, you wouldn't talk about being super sensitive. So, I mean,
my kid's going to be a janitor.
Yeah. Yep, he's going to be cooking doner kebabs on a stand by the train station.
I think on some level, and maybe I'm wrong, and I don't want to speak for the group, but I think we have outgrown the idea of patriotism in an international world. And that's not to say that patriotism can't exist and that you can't love your country. But I think
you have to love your country, but you still you can't close yourself down.
Right, but we have to circle back to, what is it about? Are you the ideals that your country was originally set out to be? Is it the land? I mean, you look at the borders of any country, all the border is a limit to the governmental reach.
Right.
Yep.
That's all a border actually is. So within the border, do you say, well, I like the Rocky Mountains, so I'm patriotic toward that, but the Rocky Mountains extended into Canada, or the Pacific Ocean. Well, Pacific Ocean touches a whole bunch of the rest of the world.
Of course, if you tell me you're patriotic towards the Pacific Ocean, then that's going to open a whole.
Well, I'm just talking about
question.
Beaches of California, Oregon, Washington.
The Pacific does have a Google review. You can look it up. I'm dead serious. It does.
Hopefully it's a good
review. Why you know that. I think I understand the point you're trying to make, Joe, is what is the basis of patriotism for any individual?
Right. And that's why you can't really define it. It has to be defined for each person alone. And only when we get into governmental or military stuff is it grouped as is it lumped in as a group kind of thing. The entire Marine Corps, the entire Army, the whole of Congress, it's just as a group thing. It's not mob mentality like, January 6th, I guess, but it's well laid out. They're very strict.
Parameters.
What I want to say. Parameters that you have to fit within. You have your chain of commands in everything that all work together to make the whole operate properly. But is that patriotism just because you're working for the best interest of the country? And are you always working towards the best interest of the country or the best interest of individuals within a specific group in the country?
Yes. Well, I would say military action outside this country, in my opinion, is not working towards the best interest of this country. Well, and that's not an indictment on the fact that either of you served, but I would say if you're going abroad and you are fighting in a foreign country, you're fighting for the interests of that country, not here.
Yeah, well, I know you say that, and yet, if there are socioeconomic ties to that nation, by default, it would actually be in America's interests.
Well, what I would maybe this will help this idea a little bit. something I've thought about a lot was, the bigger you get, the harder it is to understand that big theme that connects you, because you connect with what's around you and what's proximate to you just by nature, right? And I'd be curious to get Joe's take on this, because I think about this with the Army a lot. Because, if you include Guard, reserves, everything, the Army's over 1 million. It's just big. And so what you tend to find is within the Army, you identified with the unit you were with. Like I at the time took more pride in being in the 82nd Airborne than I did in being in the Army. My sense is with the Marine Corps, because it's a little bit more discreet, 220,000, maybe more than that now.
I don't even think it's that high. It's 180 and dropping down to 140.
And oh, by the way, on the uniform, you don't wear a lot of patches that distinguish you. Like the Army,
we don't. Yeah, we don't.
The Army wears the unit patch, on the left shoulder, and your combat patch on the right. So all these things were there to tell you kind of who you were a part of. And I always appreciated about the Marine Corps, despite the fact, it can be a little annoying at times if you're not of the Marine Corps, like how kind of centric they are of like, I'm a Marine, as opposed to I'm in the 82nd. And so I apply that thought to the United States writ large of what is the common theme that keeps us connected? Like how does an Alaska connect? How does a territory like a Puerto Rico that almost got shunned, or, some of these other areas that we treat like aren't part of the nation at times. They have no votes, yet they provide a large number of members into the military service. Like, what makes them think and be proud of being part, of America? And what would ever happen if America kind of regionalized? And let's say, like, I'm just going to use a crazy one of like Wyoming is like, nah, I don't want to provide my National Guard. I know legally they can't do that, but because once they go federal, they're going. But if a Wyoming's like, I don't really understand how this benefits Wyoming, I'm not sending the soldiers. It's like, wait, what?
Well, I think America at large probably goes, I don't see the benefit of Florida. Can we just build a fucking wall across the south border?
Lately,
I was going to say,
I want Disney World. Can we have Disney World? It can. Oh, it'll be like the Vatican. It'll be like the Vatican.
It's its own country.
It's its own nation.
Yeah,
the autonomous region of Disney.
Yeah.
If we keep going down this road, eventually Florida will turn into like Escape from New York, and they will just build a fucking wall across the north border of Florida. And just people, nobody wants
giant insects and reptiles.
Right.
And I want to clarify, I'm not suggesting it would happen, but we can't forget the fact our Civil War came about because a region decided they wanted to be a certain way and didn't think they cared about what the rest of the state said.
I guess at the end of the day, I don't know how we define patriotism. Thanks for fucking us up, Joe, bringing this topic to the table, because I don't even know how you define patriotism at this point. I'm lost.
I don't know how. And it was just, like I said, it went way back. And I just remembered that line that I sent you. And I just remember reading that. And I thought, that's an interesting line. And then just kept in my head for ages.
Do you remember the line so you can share it with them?
It was a line from Patrick O'Brien's Master and Commander. 2 naval officers are sitting in the ship talking about their past and all, and one of them said, one of them comments on patriotism. The Dr. Maturin character says, patriotism's just a word. He says, either it comes to mean my country, right or wrong, which is infamous, or my country is always right, which is imbecile. And that was the line, or to the best of my knowledge, that's what it was. And
I Googled it while you were, and that's almost verbatim.
So it said, and it was one of those where you think about it and go, your country, right or wrong, being infamous just means whether it did something right or it did something wrong, you agreed with it wholeheartedly, which is, to me, that's just imbecile itself. But my country is always right. No country's ever going to be always right.
Right.
And
correct.
That's just how it is. I had a friend who would only buy American because American was the best that you could buy. And I'm going, not necessarily, but the refrigerator was American. The car was American.
Yeah.
Everything. And I was like, okay, well, if that's the way you want to look at it, as, and I didn't fault him for it. I was like, that's your way of looking at things. I don't agree with it, But hey, that's on you.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe the modern take on patriotism is love of country, but that doesn't mean
Blindly?
Detriment.
not blindly, and it doesn't mean it's without
Criticism.
Yeah, it's above criticism or healthy skepticism /
Right.
like if its decisions can't withstand the muster of some questions of like why, then it does beg the question of no, you like, again, coming back to the idea of patriotism, I'm a patriot, but that doesn't mean my country's going to be able to just say any crazy shit and I'm be like,
and blindly follow.
Right.
Is that in the best interest of my nation or somebody who's come into power that has their own interest in mind?
At the end of the day, everybody has to decide what patriotism means to them. I think that is one thing we did take away from this, is that ultimately you have to decide, but maybe it is, in looking back, history decides who were the patriots and who weren't. And, it's not for us to say, but either way, I have enjoyed it. Thank you everyone for being here. Joe, thank you for joining us. I do appreciate you bringing this topic to the table. And so we will leave it there. And, everyone feel free, give it a listen. Think about your approach to patriotism. Drop us a line at spiriteddebates@gmail.com. If you have questions, if you have a topic, if you have a drink you'd like us to try, absolutely reach out to us. Definitely check out our YouTube channel at A Spirited Debate. We'll be posting new content there regularly. Can't wait for the next video. Already working on that one.
Some hot, sassy, freshy shit coming to that channel, baby.
Does Friday nights, is that patriotic, what you do on Friday nights?
Fuck yeah, it is,
okay,
bro.
cool.
Come on now.
Just wondering.
I mean, if I ever got to leave, I can keister some shit, okay?
It's a red, white, and blue.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, gentlemen. So we will leave it there. I do appreciate it, and we will call it a day. As always, season 2, we're rolling on. We'll see what next week has to bring. With that being said, please join us week in and week out. Obviously, you can catch our episodes anywhere where you get your podcast: Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. I don't care. It doesn't matter. As long as you're listening, that's all we care about. And again, feel free to interject. Feel free to be a part of the show. Go to our website at aspiriteddebate.com. Check out our email at spiriteddebates@gmail.com. Drop us a line. Hit us with a drink. Hit us with a topic. Let us know. We'll reach out to you, see if we can get you on the show. And as always, gentlemen, we close out the show.
Salud.
Bros.
Cheers.